relatively short period of time, so I'll talk about it when we get to it. Natasha said to me, I just want you to tell my story, your story. And I thought, well, I can do that. So I'm going to tell my story about my life and what I do here in Mary Washington. I hope along the way that some of the things I talk about connect to your lives and what you do. I urge you that if you have any questions along the way, so one thing I don't know is really how much I will connect to what you do and what you need to know. If you have any questions along the way, don't be afraid to stop me, because I will happily go off on a tangent that may be more connected to what you need to know and what you would like to do than what I have prepared here for you this evening. Welcome to University of Mary Washington. I didn't know that Lynn was going to be talking. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're able to host your organization and you folks here tonight. This is a good place to be. It's a good place to be for me. So let me tell you about my my career first, right? So Natasha said you all might be interested in knowing how I got to be where I am, so that you get a sense of how different people move through career paths and things like that. So my career path has been a combination of academics and what you might call normal job career stuff. In reality, it's kind of looked like that. I've been in academics, I had a career, I came back to academics, I had a career, and ultimately here I am in this place where I really want to be, and that is being in a career that is in academics. So how did that work? Way back when, I was an undergraduate at Penn State University in Pennsylvania, just in case you don't know where Penn State is. I had 2 undergraduate degrees from there. I was a biology undergraduate student, and I got a degree in what's called Earth and Environmental Resources Management. And so ever since I was an undergraduate, I loved biology. I really always knew that I wanted to be a biologist. But I also had this very pragmatic bent to me, and I continue to do that to this very day. So I'm not a theoretical biologist in any way, shape, or form. It's if I can't make practical use of what I want to do, then I really don't have a whole lot of interest in that. And so once I graduated from Penn State, I was pretty burnt out. And I knew that I wanted to go to graduate school, but I wasn't ready to go to graduate school, and I'm glad I did it. And so I went into the Peace Corps. I'm going to make that just a little bit bigger, because I want to give you the sense of just how important the Peace Corps has been to my personal development and shaping my career. So I don't know all of the ages that you all connect with, and I don't know if conversations about the Peace Corps and other service organizations like the Peace Corps that come up with you and your students, but I would always urge anyone that has any kind of interest in service or in the Peace Corps specifically, that they pursue that, because it's such a growing experience. I was in a country called Senegal in West Africa for 2 years. I was in a fish culture program, and so one of the things I was able to do in the Peace Corps was to practice biology in a very practical sense, teaching farmers how to raise fish in their own small fish ponds. Okay? I won't go into the details. And actually, in fact, the program that I was in Senegal was a complete failure. About 5 years after I left the program, it left Senegal. That said, fish culture is still done across the world with the Peace Corps. They're very successful programs. Why didn't it succeed in Senegal? It doesn't really matter. But what the Peace Corps did for me in terms of my career was I left the Peace Corps with 2 potential paths. I was either going to go to international development, because I did love what I did in Peace Corps, working overseas, or I knew I was going to go into some kind of environmental field. And I had to make a choice. And I made a choice, and my choice was environmental fields working in the United States. Right? And so this experience really clarified that for me. And when I first came back from the Peace Corps, I did go directly into graduate school again. It turned out I got a job teaching high school. That is in the city for DeLone Catholic High School. DeLone Catholic High School is a small Catholic school in McSherrystown, Pennsylvania. I taught there for 3 years, and I have to say at this point, I respect all of you so highly for working with middle schoolers and high schoolers, because I did that for 3 years in a Catholic school, and I knew that I just could not do that. Right, so after 3 years, I left, and then other things happened, and I was ready to go back to school and get a graduate degree. And so I went to Penn State once again in a master's degree program in resource economics. Remember I said I was an undergraduate, I was a biologist. But one of the things I learned in the Peace Corps was that people respond to price. And I became an economist thinking that I could save the world by putting dollar signs on pollution, right? And that's what led me there. Anyway, I got a degree in resource economics. It was practical. And actually, it shaped some other things in my future. When I left the Penn State with a master's degree in resource economics, I got a job at the Department of Energy. So I worked for the Fed for 4 years in what's called the Energy Information Administration. And I worked with crude oil prices and gasoline prices and diesel prices and markets of those fossil fuels. So I was an economist for a while. 4 years, I knew I didn't want to do that. I think from the very beginning I knew that I would not be doing this for the rest of my life. And so after 4 years I left the EIA. So what did that do for me? I got a lot of really good writing experience. I got a lot of really good analysis experience. And I worked with people that were not afraid to tell me how good or how sucky my work was. And you'll learn from that, right? That's part of growth, and it's an important thing that some places you get it and some places you don't get it. So, in my 4th year at the Energy Information Administration, I knew that I wanted to get back into teaching in some way, shape, or form. I actually explored some training kinds of positions where you train people how to go down into enclosed spaces. It just happened to be one of the jobs I was looking at the time. And I explored, got an interview, but then you know how that happens every once in a while. My wife and I have a conversation, and we both at the same time said, you need to go back to school and get your Ph.D. And so we had this agreement, and I went back to school to the University of Maryland to get my Ph.D. My Ph.D. is in plant biology. I'll tell you more about that. And I have been at the University of Maryland, Washington for 15 years. I just got my 15-year badge at the beginning of this year. Got a little nice bling to go along with it. So that's where I've been for the last 16 years, teaching in the Department of Biological Sciences at the University of Maryland. So to give my little spiel, I'm an ecologist, I'm a plant ecologist. I teach them introductory biology. I teach our ecology and evolution class. It's a sophomore level class. I teach conservation biology. I teach plant ecology. I teach the research process where we do some biostatistics. And so I do a little bit of everything that's more the field side of biology. So I'm an ecologist. I like to work outside. So that's what I've been doing. And one of the reasons I went back to get, that isn't working too well, I knew I needed to get my Ph.D. because I knew I needed that to teach in undergraduate schools. And so that was, honestly, I got my Ph.D. because I could teach where and who I wanted to teach that level of undergraduates, right? Middle schoolers, middle school teachers, how in the heck can you do that? I mean, seriously, you are crazy. Because I just feel like I can't reason with a child that age. I could start reasoning with high schoolers. At some level, you're laughing, is that not true? But I really think that I can have a conversation with undergraduates, and so that's where I end up, where I am right now. both because University of Mary Washington is a primarily undergraduate teaching institution, and so this is where I want to be. Okay. I'm a conservation scientist. Okay. I call myself a plant ecologist, kind of the research that I did originally, that's what it is. But this really places my interest in wanting to understand species that are of conservation concern. This is one way to represent that, all right? So I'm interested in the species that are the most imperiled species in the United States and in the world. And in fact, I do research with a plant that is threatened on the endangered species list, so it's not endangered, but it's in the next level down from being endangered. So I care about things like the Endangered Species Act. That's really what brought me into that science. At first was interested in a particular species, and I will talk about that. But along the way, when you do enough conservation science, you realize, well, the scale is bigger than that, right? So I'm not just interested in individual species, I'm interested in biological diversity as a whole. And when I was looking for images to represent that, I liked this one because, yes, there are plants on there. I made sure that there were plants on there. When I looked at this, there's a tree up there, there's something that looks like a flower, that orange thing in the middle. But you know what? This also puts humans. Now, whether you put humans in the middle or not, we can have a conversation about that, but there is no question in my mind that conservation science must include humans in what we do, because we are at fault for a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world and endangered species and things like that. But anyway, we're connected. I clipped this off of the internet too, because as an economist, I learned that there are things about value that are not monetary. Right? And so one of the things that I learned as a resource economist, that I would like to put value on aesthetic. I would like to try to put value on beauty. I would like to put value on things other than how much do I get from a tree when you cut it down. And so conservation science is not just about ecology, the water in the bottom, although that's a lot of it. It's also about understanding value beyond how we understand value, where we pay for things. So that's just become, that's where my economics gets molded in with my ecologist. I can talk to people about that in conservation biology. When I teach that, we talk about all these different kinds of things. So I'm a conservation scientist. Then they have any questions. I usually pause much more from that. Okay, so starting back when I was in graduate school at the University of Maryland in 1996, I found this model system, this plant that was threatened. It was of conservation concern, and we didn't know very much about it. And so I can honestly say that I'm the world expert on the ecology of this plant. Yay. But when you see how far it's distributed, it's like, oh, well, you don't. Anyway, this is a flower of sensitive joy veg. It's called Astronomically virginica. There's me counting seeds. Over my career, I have counted lots of seeds on this plant. Plant is distributed from, well, so you'll see Pennsylvania is lit up there. Excuse me. Pennsylvania is lit up there. There are no longer any Astronomically virginica plants in Pennsylvania. They're extinct from that state long ago. Delaware is lit up there, but there are no longer any plants living in Delaware. So it's found in New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, and there are a couple of populations in North Carolina. When you blow that up, this is what it looks like. So there's all the state that it's found in. The orange dots are where there are still plants, living plant populations living in those states. The black squares are where we know Astronaut virginica was years ago, but has not been found in many years. That many years is probably more than 25 years or something like that. So you can see extant populations in southern New Jersey, on both the eastern shore and western shore of Maryland. The large majority of the populations are found here in Virginia. And there's that one population down there in North Carolina. That's actually in a drainage ditch for some cornfields that are close to a fish and wildlife property of some kind for the United States. So it's kind of a weird kind of population. So it is very narrowly distributed, and it's not found in many of the kinds of wetlands where we would expect to find it. So this is a freshwater tidal plant, freshwater tidal, so it's high, it's far enough upstream that it's under tidal, well, it's low enough downstream that it's under tidal influence, but it's high enough upstream that there's enough fresh water coming down that it doesn't get salty there, all right? And it doesn't do well in salt environments either, so you won't find it. Folks know where Tappahannock is? All right, so actually there was a population right around Tappahannock, but not on the main stem of the Rappahannock River. It's in one of the smaller streams that are still freshwater. If you go into the river in Tappahannock nowadays, it's actually starting to get salty. I think it's like 2 or to 5 parts per million, parts per thousand salt, something like that. And then there are a couple miles upriver. There you start to see some populations of that. So it doesn't like salt water. Right. When I first started working with this plant, this is kind of what we knew about this plant. We knew, at least in terms of research that's more than just people taking a look at where this plant lives and trying to figure out what might be true about it. We mostly knew that it was on freshwater tidal rivers, like this one. This is off of the Pamunkey River in New Kent County. This river is called Holt's Creek, and it's a property that's owned by the Nature Conservancy, so I've also been working with the Nature Conservancy for many years. I have circled a group of this plant, and there's another group of this plant. You can see it looks a little bit darker than the rest of the background, if you can see that. So that's the population of this plant. We knew it lived along the edge of streams like this, and that's pretty much what we knew about it. And so I started with that, and I started asking questions about what determines the population sizes of this plant or these rivers. I did a lot of work with seeds. It's an annual plant, so that basically means that seeds are really important to this plant. I have done research, actual controlled experiments out in the field. So if you, I don't know, if you ever have these conversations with your science students, and you talk about controlled experiments, they don't just happen in the lab, they happen outside in the field too. And we learned all the same kinds of important stuff about controlled experiments in the field as we do in the lab. I've learned a lot about what partly determines the reproductive rates of plants in these populations. Competition really matters for this plant. So this is another picture. There's a fairly, well, that's a flowering plant. So that's a fairly old plant. And then there's another plant with flowers on it. So reproduction really matters. If you want to know more about this plant, I will happily talk to you about that more. I didn't figure that we wanted to talk data today. I've done a little bit of research on herbivory and what eats these seeds and how many seeds get eaten in a particular year. And so that's all fun stuff for me as a researcher. But because, so I said before, I came to the University of Mary Washington because I wanted to teach. Right? My first love is not research. And I think if you ask anybody in the biology department at Mary Washington, our first love is not to research, it's being educators. Right? So I come here and that's what I get to do. And so I support undergraduate students in doing research with me. Yes?
My question is on task list, right?
That's okay.
So you came across this plan that is really rare, per se, and you don't mention any, like, animals or other organisms that's pinned on this plan yet, unless there's a surprise, and that's the catch-22. So, did you just look for a really rare, I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't have, like, you know, the ecology of the planet and its existence in the ecosystem has value, obviously it does, but like, why? Why? Yeah, like, what was the top there?
So, so I will give you the short answer to that.
Right.
The answer to this question actually caused me problems along the way. I chose the system because it was rare. Because it was rare. No, I chose it because it was rare. When I was looking to do research at the University of Mary Washington, my advisor gave me a lot of latitude in what I wanted to do. And he wasn't even a population ecologist. He was a he was a photosynthesis guy, ecological physiology. But he gave me a lot of latitude, and I developed, and so I just started going and looking for rare plants. And you look at these rare plants and you try to figure, and you find that we don't know much about any of these things. That intrigued me by itself. That said, people ask me that so what question all the time, right? You look at a plant like this, that is only found from New Jersey to North Carolina, and where we find that the populations are relatively small, right? So when you go to one of these wetlands, there aren't very many of these plants there, and people say, so what? And if I'm being honest with myself and you, I would say, you're right, so what? So at some level, this was an academic interest to me. But then you know, along the way when you learn about that plant, you learn other stuff about bigger issues and about science that's not just connected to this plant. Right? So there are some things about this plant that I think we can generalize, but you know, conservation scientists very often they're very place specific and they're organism specific, and that's just okay with me. And what it has been able to do with me, right? So it really connects well with me being here because this population that I work at is 2.5 hours down the road. And so that allows me with very little money in my pocket to continue to do work in this system and support our undergraduate students that want to do research with me. So, you know, way back when, I chose it just because it was a rare plant. And one of the reasons I came to Mary Washington was because that I could work on these populations that are very close to where this is. Yeah?
Do you make them plants like an indicator for something larger that could be going on in these ecosystems?
That is, so the property that I work on is a Nature Conservancy property. And if you know, do folks know about Nature Conservancy? Their basic philosophy is that we purchase land to protect it. That's one of the, it's not the only thing they do, but it's one of the main things they do. One of the reasons they purchased this property because it was a known site for sensitive joint fetch. And it's a very pristine, if you want to find a nice place to spend your summers, come along with me and I'll take you out on the water and you'll see that this is a wonderful place to spend your summers, except when it's 103 degrees. Usually it's okay. So anyway, they consider it to be an indicator species of that. And from their perspective, so they are a science-driven organization. And so from their perspective, anything more that we can learn about this plant that is considered to be an indicator for the overall quality of freshwater tidal wetlands, we want to find out more about it. Other questions? Okay, so these are some of the students that I've worked at. I was looking for photographs, and I sadly cannot find photographs of all the students that I've worked with over the years. And quite frankly, I forget some of the names of my students from like 16 years ago, 15. You can forgive me for that, right? But I can say a couple things. So the lady up on the left-hand side, she left University of Mary Washington and she got into a master's degree program that was, I think it was in Minnesota, and she was working with one of the top flight researchers in wetland restoration in the country. Her name is Joy Zedler, is what her name was. I honestly can't remember this young lady's name. So my point there, I have a couple points there. So that I consider to be, we do really good work here at University of Mary Washington, and I hope that you're talking to your students as they're thinking about going to college, that University of Mary Washington can compete with any of the schools in Virginia in terms of quality of education. But on top of that, we are a primary undergraduate and a liberal arts institution. So our students, when they get a liberal arts education at the University of Mary Washington, can compete with anyone going to these what you research one institutions in terms of their background in education. Right? So wherever your students go in the STEM, going to a liberal arts school is a good thing. It's not a liability in any way, shape, or form, especially if they come to the University of Mary Washington. This lady, I think she wanted to be a veterinarian of some kind. Gentleman up the top, his name is Damon Lowry. And Damon, he got a master's degree. He worked up at Quantico. I think he was actually an employee of the federal government, so he was doing ecological work on the site up there. And he quit that job, and now he's doing analysis work for a private firm. So he's done all kinds of different things. He's been very successful out of a master's degree program after he left the University of Mary Washington. Very briefly, then, just got to finish up the research that I'm interested in. More recently, on the state property, the Nature Conservancy had a dam, an old man-made dam that had this pond dammed up, and it was falling apart, like a lot of man-made dams that are 60 years old or so. And they decided to take it out. So this is the picture of the dam on the left-hand side, and then this is them pumping water out of the pond after they had dug the dam out. And I came in after this, actually before and after, and I wanted to know how will the plant populations and communities change from before the dam being there and after. So I developed a whole series of research over the last 5 or 6 years that looks at those questions. This is my success picture of what can happen when you do restoration. So this is where the dam used to be. And this was very soon after the dam was removed, and they opened up the stream completely. And we were out there one night, and that's a snapping turtle. And so one of the big things about removing dams is creating connectivity or reconnecting watersheds. And this was our, oh my gosh, this really works. This animal moving from the stream out the back into the pond, which is on the left-hand side of the sketch. And the lady on the right was one of the students that had worked on this project for a couple of years. She is now getting a master's degree in the marine sciences down in Charleston, North Carolina. A couple more students that worked with me. It's interesting where students go after they do research as undergraduates, right? It's another thing that you want to tell students is that you can get a biology degree, but end up not doing biology. It's just okay. Am I good for time? I have no.
Yeah, you got like 10 minutes.
Okay, that'll work. So the gentleman on the left, he's actually going into a graduate degree at Frostburg State in conservation. And the lady on the left, he got into a public health program. If you're, this is my pitch for public health. Can you hear me? Okay. Public health. So we have lots of students that come into Mary Washington that they all want to be doctors. Like if 100 people want to be doctors, 2 of them will become doctors. I don't know if that's the real statistics, but it's something like that. And I think one of the unknown health fields that are biologically related is public health. So I'm often steering students that are interested in the health sciences and they either really don't want to be a doctor, they don't like person-to-person care, or quite frankly, sometimes they just can't get into medical school. This is a good option for those folks. This is a young lady that worked really hard. Now she's a really good public health program. I've done a couple other projects again. I've had the opportunity in Mary Washington to work with this gentleman. Created a project connected around National Virginia. We built walkways out on the marsh. He built, this is another thing, he built all that stuff that's coming out of that cooler. He built probes basically to test something like pH in the soil. And another thing, if you're looking for things that students find a difficult time getting, is that you need to learn how to troubleshoot. When you get into real jobs, just knowing science or math doesn't get you through the day. But learning how to solve problems is what really gets you through the day. And he did an amazing job of that. Lastly, so my job is changing now because I'm interested in map making. And so I make maps connected to the rare plant that I work with. I'm now in the middle of a project where I'm mapping all the trees on the campus of the University of Mary Washington. So I've just started using these tools of map making to do work that I do. Now, Natasha asked me to talk about STEM skills and knowledge that I think are important for students. And I cut my teeth on natural science, or natural history, I'm sorry. So when I was an undergraduate, I just learned how to identify stuff. I thought it was really cool to be able to identify trees and plants. And can you hear me? I'll talk about it. Okay. Trees and plants and spiders and things like that. And so if you have students that are kind of on the ecology side of science, or they just like to be outside, this is becoming, I think, a lost ability and knowledge, is simply to know the stuff that's outside. This is a saleable skill at some point in your life. Now, education. So for me, so I'm an ecologist. Physics was really important, even though I'm a biologist. Now, I have to say only the first semester of physics. Do you remember what the second semester of physics was? It's electronics, and it's magnetism, and it's optics. Oh my God, optics. I never got optics. But the first semester of physics, basically Newtonian physics, got me a long way in understanding how the world works. Right? So I think any science students, if they're not required to take physics, I would push them to take one of those physics courses. Same idea with calculus. This first semester of calculus makes perfect sense. I'm a modeler, and so I use these ideas all the time. Understanding what a function is and how you create it is a really important thing for lots of different kinds of sciences. Second semester calculus, no thank you very much for myself. Sorry to make math teachers. I have no use for the second semester of calculus as a biologist. And I can tell you why if you're interested in the end. It just was weird to me. I did all of it. Natasha had mentioned soft skills, right? So people call writing and speaking in the sciences soft skills. No, it's not a soft skill. It is a necessary skill. And so I think if we talk about writing and speaking as that, a soft skill, you get the wrong point across. It is simply a necessity of any job that you do. Right? So as often as you can get your students writing and speaking, technical writing, please. You have juniors and seniors that still can't write a report well. They get confused by it. They try to give me fluff and lovely stuff. And I say, if you're going to use a word, keep using that same word and don't change it. So writing speaking skills are STEM skills. And we will continue to work on that as undergraduates, and I know you guys will learn that too. get out of the classroom, do internships, or whatever these students might do this summer that's not in the classroom. You know, research that they might do, for example, the research that Natasha mentioned, and there's lots of opportunities like that out there. Get them out of the classroom, because then they're forced to troubleshoot. They're forced to solve problems and not just answer questions that are on a test or however you are evaluating them. I put this up a second time. If students have questions about career paths and how to get there, there are just all kinds of different ways that you can get from an undergraduate degree. This is from our experience and what we see our students do. Right? You can go from an undergraduate to graduate school or a professional school and get out into the real world. I just mentioned here, this is really important. Tell your students if they're concerned about graduate school at their younger ages. In biology and many other sciences, they should never pay for graduate school. Never. If you want to know how that works, I will let you know how that works. Okay. We have students that graduate from our Mary Washington. They go to an entry-level lab position, right, bench work, or an entry-level position. And then they figure out what they want to do. And they get into grad school. And that's a way to work around not very good grades as an undergraduate. You get a job, you do really well, you get good letters of recommendation, and then you can get into graduate school. There are all kinds, certainly in field ecology and biology, there are all kinds of volunteer opportunities and internships that students in like really tight areas, oftentimes conservation. Let's see, organizations save mammals that are beached, right? Those are really competitive positions. And the only way nowadays to get into a zoo or to get into a rehabilitation business of any kind is to do volunteer work and internships and get to know folks that are running these businesses, and then you can maybe get